Hi, everyone. I see the attendee list growing. We'll just wait a couple minutes for folks to be able to hop on. I think it's slowing down. And this session is being recorded, so I will go ahead and get started if that works for our presenters. Awesome. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Hong. I am Director of Volunteers with UXPA International, and I'm so excited to introduce two of our speakers today. We have Jenni Bruckman. She's VP of Customer Success and Strategic Partnerships at WEVO. And we also have Paula Sappington, who is Senior Director of Digital Research at Hilton. And they are going to share how you take quantitative and qualitative data and deliver on an excellent customer experience, as well as informing business decisions. So I will pass it over to them in a second to share a little bit more about their backgrounds, as well as their topic today. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded. The recordings will be available in the UXPA website in our webinar library. And other updates, we just had our conference, so those recordings may be available for sale at some point. And we are already planning for the next one. So we hope you will join us in Austin next year. Aside from that, we can always use volunteers, whether it's to help curate content like this and work with our awesome speakers. So if anyone is interested in volunteering, please reach out. All right, Jenni and Paula, I will pass it on to you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jenni. We've got lots of Jennies on this call. Awesome. We are so excited to chat today. I'm selfishly just excited anytime I get to talk about optimization and research things alongside Paula. So we're going to be covering really the idea of shifting left to win right with the customer experience. And as Jenni said, it's really about combining the best of powers of qualitative and quantitative. So without further ado, I just want to share one reminder. I don't remember if Jenni said it, but we're going to cover all Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll look for them there. So without further ado, I'm going to toss it over to Paula for her intro.
Hi, everyone. Paula Sappington. Work at Hilton in digital research. I've been a researcher for almost 30 years now. Been at Hilton for about 25 years. Began with traditional market research at first and shifted over to digital about 13 years ago. So you'll hear a lot about our program here today, but I am based in Memphis, the busy family of 5 and growing with a brand new grandbaby. So that's my excitement. Jenni, I'll pass to you.
Love it. Everything shades in comparison after that. I'm Jenni Bruckman. I lead our partnerships and success over here at WEVO. So I actually have been in the optimization space, primarily A/B testing, for the last 12 plus years, and fell in love with WEVO as a solution when I was leading a few different engagements, most recently at Accenture Interactive. So I've come from working with a whole bunch of different brands in the space, but primarily trying to help increase those conversion rates and just improve overall site experiences through A/B testing. And personally just saw the value of layering qual into that over the last couple of years, and really just got excited about trying to make that easier. So I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have 2 furry kids in the house and one that lives at the barn. I have a horse and 2 dogs, so that's usually what keeps me and the family busy. So we'll jump straight into a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to go through 3 sections of content. So first, Paula's going to walk us through really the idea of how quant and qual are siloed for most organizations today, and just an overview of the insights landscape as a whole. So that's going to lay the groundwork for really the importance of this conversation and what we're going to cover. And then I'm going to jump back in after that and talk a bit about how we can accelerate impact of combining quant and qual with some easier methods and ways, and really bringing that to life with a use case application of how I personally fell in love with using both quant and qual to deliver greater impact. And then we'll shift into the 3rd section to wrap things up, which is really just bringing all of that together to talk about how we turn that into the next iteration. What does the future state look like? And ultimately, how do we shift left to win right? So without further delay from there, we're going to jump straight over into that first section, and I'll pass the mic over to Paula.
So I want to give you all an overview of our program at Hilton, because I think it will lay the groundwork and set the context for everything that we're going to discuss today, or my perspective, what we're going to discuss today. So I came over to the digital team in 2008. We had a small optimization practice, and by small, I mean we had about a half of an FTE dedicated to thinking about A/B testing. At the time, we were lucky enough to have budget for some large in-depth qualitative studies. So this was, just sort of hiring an outside consultant to do some in-depth interviews with our customers. And those studies, we did just a couple of them each year, but those really informed our program. They're expensive and time consuming, but they really generated amazing insights for us. In 2016, as a company, we shifted over into a more formalized human-centered design product organization to be truly customer-led. So that's when we began hiring UX researchers to collect feedback from customers. So we wanted to be much more agile than doing those big, time-consuming qualitative studies. Those UX researchers began collecting feedback from customers, and that would really supplement the analytics and the A/B testing results that we would receive. And they would, the qualitative feedback really ultimately informed our roadmap. So currently we have 5 people on our experimentation or A/B testing team, and we have 8 UX researchers, and we're continuing to grow because we've really proven the concept and proven the value. So we are one combined team. The A/B testing team and the qualitative research team both sit in my group, and they work together every day, which drives exponential learning because just everyone across, all parts of what I call research are understanding the customer perspective. So pairing the quantitative results from A/B tests and the qualitative results, it really results in a through line of learning. So why do we do it? For us, the benefits are really, really clear. The main thing I want to focus on is de-risking. So the idea of de-risking is where we think about the 2 types of risk that we can really reduce with UX research. We've got the value risk, which essentially is, will they use it? Will they buy the thing? And then there's usability risk, which is, can they use it? So it's really one of the most important things we do is to try and de-risk as much as we can. So if we're doing it right, we always have customer feedback before any project will begin. And actually, the feedback should help define the roadmap and even the priority of what we work on to start with. So then we put it in front of customers as often as we can. Sometimes it's a concept, a paper prototype, or just talking through a concept, really trying to validate the solutions that we've dreamt up. And other times it's, understanding how a customer wants to interact with a flow on our site. So we're de-risking. We also want to democratize. We want to share what we know. I think it's important in an organization of any size, you can share your learnings, whether it's a large enterprise like ours or just a small company You can share learnings and from customer feedback to assist in everyone's work. And of course, based on customer feedback, the experiences are going to be better. There's no doubt about it. But there are challenges, right? They're not new. We need to do more faster with less resources, all of us. So many organizations really don't have the luxury of the resources like I've described, being able to have UX researchers kind of embedded in each project team to be able to go gather learnings, much less having them being able to exist on the same team as the A/B testing folks are doing their learning. So let's talk about the silos and just the general landscape. So generally, we know that about 90% of customers want authenticity. There are a lot of the niche kind of innovative companies out there that have given our customers a glimpse of like authentic, personalized experiences. And we all have to start following that lead. Our customers just demand it. We also know that on average, to build authentic and purposeful platforms, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks to build something these days. And that's once you know what to build. That's just the actual hands-on keyboards. So if you layer insights and feedback in, it can really elongate the process. And then you combine that with an average win rate of A/B testing programs of somewhere around 25%. So if that being the case, then 75% of the time you're either flat or you're causing a decrease. So shipping code is a huge risk. And that's when you're able to test, right? We haven't even covered the cost of development, QA, all the things that have to happen to launch something into production or to launch a test. So there can be huge upside and really to a really great digital experience, but there's also lots and lots of risk. So we talked about what customers want and the time it takes and the risk. So let's talk about what we can do to help improve the process. So first, I want to start talking about quantitative testing. Now, let me define what I mean by quant here. For the purposes of today, I'm really just talking about A/B testing or multivariate testing in an optimization program. That's what I think of as the quantitative side of research, in addition, of course, to large scale surveys, et cetera. But what I'm not referring to is like digital analytics, which of course is an entirely vital input to everything we're discussing. But I want to put that idea aside for now and just think more about the quantitative research side of things, which is gathering feedback from our customers live on site. So what does A/B testing tell us? So it tells us first, what do users engage with when you're running a test? What variables matter to customers? It tells us, obviously, which variation we should actually build and launch into production. And, the idea of the data that spits out of that test, which should inform our next test. So what drives people who think in this space and their kind of mindset? So A/B testing, very analytical and quantitative, it really coincides with left brain activities. So when we think about people who think this way, what makes them tick? And I mean people and organizations, if you haven't guessed it. So when we think about left brain organizations, it's really the data-driven decision maker. We just need to know what worked best. We think in numbers, rely on analytics platforms, and ultimately let statistical significance rule the day. It's incredibly objective. It's incredibly valuable. So where does the qualitative side then fit in? So again, I want to take a moment and explain what I mean by qualitative. So I'm really talking about getting out and talking to customers. So typically we call it UX research, but it's really just listening for context and clues and identifying mental models. So qualitative research is really a kind of a systematic way to investigate users and their requirements. And you can add context and insight into the process of design and development for user experience. So the way we do this qualitative work, it can be exploratory, where you're just out talking to customers about the way they think of, in my case, the process of booking a hotel room. It can be generative research, where you're actively asking them questions about ways in which they might want to experience a specific digital experience. And then it can be all the way to solution validation. So you've gathered all that generative research. The team has taken all that into account, narrowed down to a couple of ways to address that problem or that issue. And you go back out and test the ideas of those solutions for the customers. And you can get all the way into usability testing, which is, here's a screen, a proposed screen. Talk to us about how you'd walk through that and what your expectations are. We at Hilton find that it's best done when it's led by trained researchers. They can ensure you're gathering objective feedback. There's lots and lots of ways to do this, but objectivity is really the key to the game. In the absence of trained researchers, anybody can really do this. I would argue, it's good to have some training to understand how to have objective conversations with customers, not, leading the witness a little bit. So if this is the kind of work you want to try and do, I would say be willing to listen, be willing to learn, also willing to have your feelings hurt a little bit, especially if you're a designer or an architect. Because more often than not, we are sort of ensconced in our product. We don't have the same perspective as the customer. We know exactly how this thing works. And so it's really insightful and also sometimes, a little disheartening. But that's the gold, right? Is discovering those problems and customer issues. So everybody should be exposed to this. Product owners, developers, designers, and your executives. It's often the most valuable data that they will hear is maybe a recording or watching a video of somebody's struggle with a digital experience. It's incredibly valuable. So Jenni, do you mind going back to the last slide? Sorry, I talked a lot, I introduced that a lot, but I think hopefully that was helpful and important. So what does this qualitative research tell us? It tells us, what problems are we trying to solve? What problems should we try and go after? Are we looking to innovate, or are we just looking to sort of reduce friction? What are the user's expectations? And what do we learn that can inform our future roadmaps? Okay, so back to our brains. We talked about the left brain. When we think about right brain activities, what makes right brain organizations tick? These are people and companies who want to hear directly from their customers. They hear in words. They're convinced by discussions and conversations, and they react to the strength of the feelings that are being expressed. So there's nothing like watching a customer struggle through a digital experience and you just watch it and it's painful. And that really is evocative for the people who are then out trying to solve those problems. These kinds of programs are tracked by special programs that really enable the distribution of learning of this kind of research. And doing this helps you understand the why, the why people are approaching things and why they're doing things the way they're doing it. Okay, so what happens if we combine our brain and make it a full brain? When we put things like this together, so first of all, you get the collaboration of data supported by the words, the verbatims and the comments and the feelings. You get a reliable signal, which is like a true statistical significance. You get data on your own behaviors, but you also understand the context, and that's invaluable. Maybe the customers have always just done the thing, but they might struggle through it, the whole way, and you wouldn't know that unless you got the context and you were out talking to them. So you get a marriage of qualitative and quantitative. So if the left brain could be considered the provider of the KPIs in the organization, start to think about the right brain as the KPYs. And together, it's better. It's just a better organizational thought process, which is going to lead to a better outcome for your customers. So I would encourage you all by saying that a test and learn culture is really possible, even for small companies, if you have the right perspective. At Hilton, we have robust teams of experts on both the quant side, the A/B testing side, and the qualitative side, and UX researchers. And that enables us to do that and have that robust learning. And later, what I'll show you is the value of what that's meant for Hilton. But first, I want to share with you a framework with which you might start to think about an approach that might help you start to get there. So how do we bring this to any organization? So in order to gather learnings, we know that both types of insights are incredibly valuable. And you've got reliability, and you've got your insights, your kind of qualitative insights. So the y-axis here is your insights. This is learnings that we can gather about the context and the emotions and the expectations of the customers. This is the y, WHY, as well as the y-axis. The x-axis here is reliability. So when you think about this through an optimization or A/B testing lens, this is that reliable signal that we get from a high sample size, statistical significance, random controlled trials, and measurement all the way through. So if you think about the bottom quadrant, when you're low on insights and reliability, you're really just working with intuition. You're not really gathering customer feedback, and you have no N. You have an absence of N, or very small N. Sometimes if you suffer from the hippo effect, you might have an N of 1 or an N of a few executives, but you're not being customer led. In the hippo world, often you're in react mode without a congruent, cohesive strategy or roadmap. So if you begin to add some insights gathering through UX research, and again, this could be really small scale, just you out standing around talking to your customers, or something a little more, robust and formalized. You can begin to understand the customer's mental model. So this is where you get rich, insightful data that provides great direction, but it's not easy. And it's qualitative, usually with a low N, which isn't really a problem because low N iteratively can still help you de-risk and get you where you need to be. But it can be a challenge sometimes for organizational cultures. We have a lot of leaders who might not understand that. So, I talked to 10 people and they overwhelmingly gave me this response, but all your executive heard was 10 people. That's not nearly enough. So sometimes it's hard to sell through. So then we think about the reliability side, and another tool in the toolkit is A/B testing through some sort of optimization program. So as we know, this is where we're doing proper random controlled trials, which are accurate. They allow you to iterate and learn in a precise way. This is quantitative data with a high N. So this is vital. And it's real easy for those left brain folks to rally around. Statistical significance is really helpful to convince anyone of anything. But as we know, there's still plenty of risk and effort involved, and you're still shipping code. Like we talked about earlier, there's still a lot of effort and risk when it comes to shipping anything. So when you're living in this quadrant only, and you're low on the y-axis, you're deciding what to experiment or what to test in a bit of a vacuum. right? You might still be in the hippo world of your hippos telling you what to test. And you're not really taking into account the qualitative feedback from your customers. But if you can combine both and live in this green quadrant, that's where the magic happens. So this is where we're going to bring qualitative insights to inform what customer problems to solve and what to spend your time on. This it tells you where and what to A/B test to really increase your chances of success. So when you're living in this green quadrant, you can use qualitative to de-risk cheaply and nimbly, and inform the more costly, time-consuming tests in order to increase your win rate of experiments, which therefore increases your learnings and by default, your bottom line. Now, if you're on this call, you might be siloed and doing some of the low end, or you might only be doing high end, but maybe you haven't considered doing both. If you are doing both, then kudos, because you're best in class. There aren't very many companies who are lucky enough to be able to do it, because this is hard. This is hard. So at Hilton, we're lucky enough to have teams who work on both the high and the low end, and come together in that green quadrant, because they all sit on one team, which is just amazing and truly results in better output. So now I'll toss it to Jenni to talk about ways to maximize that impact of doing both.
Love it. Paula has built the program I would from scratch if I had it to just start at the beginning and do it all over. So what I'm going to talk about in this section of content is a bit more about how that's possible for teams that maybe are starting from scratch, or teams that are, really robust in one of those quadrants, but not really able to pull both of those silos together quite yet. So I want to talk for a moment about UX research on its own and just give credit to how much labor and expertise is required. So Paula alluded to this, it's a heavy lift every time you run a research study. And to her point, it really should be done by an expert level practitioner. It should be led by a qualified and trained researcher. But that researcher or that research team has to manually execute all the steps in the process. And sometimes that means starting from scratch on every study that you run and creating the research plan and performing the interviews, reviewing all the quotes and videos and notes. That's hours unto itself, even with the aid of transcripts and things like that. And that feedback and that research at that point is still purely qualitative, which is enormously valuable and always will be. But it's just a real heavy effort to go manually cleanse and organize and categorize and try to understand really where that signal versus noise is amongst the key insights that you're getting. And so you don't have that reliability of statistical significance in the feedback that you've collected. So lots of hours by lots of expert level practitioners. Then the next layer of that is thinking about how that's a common challenge for A/B testing teams. So typically an A/B testing team within an org is more of a pod structure of maybe a strategist, a UX designer, a front end or a back end developer, and then you've got your data analyst, and maybe you have some additional roles like project managers or others. Maybe you've decentralized A/B testing to product owners and teams. Regardless of how you're structured, it's twice as many hours because you've got typically more resources required to not only conceptualize the experience or the variations you want to test and prepare and thoughtfully craft how you want to measure those and build and launch them, but then you have to actually go put them live into field, and you're dependent on a retrospective view of that data. So you're monitoring in-flight performance, you're waiting until there's enough traffic to call a statistically significant winner, and then you get to dive into the deep dive analysis that you want to perform. So both of these unto themselves are and will always be enormously important, but let's see how we can try to make this a little bit easier as we think about the effort that's required and really spending that time on the more complex problems and freeing up some capability to come at gathering insights that are both insightful and reliable in a little bit of an easier way. So we're going to introduce this idea of let's let some AI powered and human augmented AI do some of that magic for us and do some of that heavy lifting. So as we think about how can we automate this? How can we make this a lot easier? Let's think about three main sections of this process. We've got the preparation stage. So you've got recruitment. Typically, we can expedite that with automating the recruitment step. That doesn't need to be reinventing the wheel every time. Nor do we need to reinvent the wheel each time on our study design or our test plan. So we can standardize and use a reliable and a proven framework and methodology over and over and over again with some slight customizations, so that we're not spending that original time every time we launch a test creating everything from scratch. Now we can get into executing faster and easier, because preparation was faster and easier. So executing can be streamlined in a lot of ways with human augmented AI, but most important benefit of that is we're not limited to the scale of what humans and hours can produce. We can now run as many studies as we want asynchronously, so we can really break open that logjam of demand for insights that typically clogs up a big backlog of research and A/B testing requests, and starts to deliver a much faster clip of asynchronous studies and insights and results. And then we take it from, okay, we've simplified preparation, we've simplified and automated execution. So how do we simplify and automate analysis? I'm just going to make up words, analysis and sharing of those results. So automating the analysis is the first and foremost thing that we can do to our benefit. We don't need to rethink creating the new spreadsheet from scratch of thousands of survey results and just making that daunting task an everyday occurrence. That can be automated, that can be machine-led. And then we can standardize and simplify the data story. So the benefit here is once we start to create a consistent way that we look at and receive results and share results across the org, we can now start to streamline organization, because socializing these results becomes a muscle memory. We start to expect a similar view and a similar way to take in some of these insights every time. So standardizing, simplifying throughout really exists at these three key points along the process, but it is really possible, and it does make a huge difference to teams. So if we bring that together, how do we think about taking the best of what humans can do, and then pairing that with the best of what humans with AI can do? So human-led research and A/B testing, as I said, I can't emphasize this enough, is today and will always be enormously valuable. But they shouldn't be constrained to just trying to field all the incoming requests for their backlog of tests that they want run across all these teams. They should be able to spend their time spending the solutions and understanding the more complex problems. So then let's leverage AI power to make insights more accessible to all of these teams that have this high demand for insights all the time, and leverage all those benefits we just talked about. How can we standardize and streamline this? So all team members have access to solutions that can help you understand insights with just a couple of steps of, I just need to understand the experience I want to evaluate. So identifying what you want to test, and then reviewing the results. So you get to spend the upfront and the back end time doing all that fun part, and then you don't have to spend any of that middle time. That's really where WEVO and our perspective is. That should be easier. So human augmented AI recruits the panel. We standardize that recruitment process. We survey the audience with a proven and a reliable framework and methodology. We analyze the data in a consistent and reliable way. So you're getting used to that muscle memory of, these are the consistent lenses I'm always going to look at. And then we summarize the takeaways. That's the biggest and hairiest part of all, is that data storytelling. What did we actually learn from this, and where was the signal versus the noise? So summarizing that is really critical. Then you just get to do the fun part of reviewing the results. That's the Christmas morning feeling of, I just want the goodie of what we're learning, and to really understand those nuggets of gold that we're getting out of the tests. So we go from hundreds of hours to half an hour spent by these various teams, be it the experts or be it the broader teams like product and et cetera. And now we can start to create that appetite and that consistent demand for holistic approach to insights that are repeatable, scalable. It's rinse and repeat over and over again. So we're always going to need to summarize, what did we learn from a big picture for each test? So we're going to summarize that in a dashboard. It's going to give you an effectiveness score of the experience as a whole. recap what you were really aiming to learn and the goal of that test and the audience details so that the results are really reliable. And we're targeting a much bigger sample size, I should mention too. So instead of always having that barrier of the problem between, I have to choose between really rich insights of a small sample size and a huge sample size without any understanding of the why, we want to bring both of those together. So we're going to target a much higher sample size of around 120 to 150 people for every qualitative research test that we're running now. So standardizing all of that and then recapping and refreshing in a consistent way each time. So you get used to looking for key information in the same places. Understanding diagnostics, not just how your experience performed relative to itself of its strengths and weaknesses, but also how it performed relative to industry benchmarks, because you're evaluating different experiences across a standardized framework. Expectations and gaps that users have against those, visualize sentiment. So really being able to click in and understand, what did users like, what did users dislike, where and why, most importantly, why. So all of this needs to be paired and is paired with massive amounts of verbatims. And then you can click in and really digest and dissect, where did the verbatims help me understand the why of a popularity of the page or a really turn off section of the page or experience. And then sometimes on top of that standardized framework, there are things you custom want to ask or investigate, key hypotheses you're curious about. So having the ability, and for UX research experts, they want some trustworthy control over the standardized approach, but then some ability to customize on top of that. Custom questions are a great way to do that. And then standardizing those key findings. So it's about taking a holistic approach each and every time you address those insights. And by doing this, we're not only breaking open that backlog, demand for insights is higher than it's ever been. Teams are struggling to find enough researchers on a daily basis. I hear that across the board. If we look at, not that many years out, the demand is going to be even higher. And it's not like every university program in the world can produce this many people graduating with this degree to meet that demand. And so these are really smart teams, and they are passionate about this space. They are hungry for, whether they're A/B testing side or research side, they're hungry for insights. They're hungry for understanding what worked, what didn't, and most importantly, why. But constantly they're having to work harder and smarter. And so, from our perspective, it's really about, how do we make reliable insights a more effortless access for them? How do we make it an everyday must-have? How do we make it a way of doing business on a daily basis? And then creating that as an everyday essential within the org. The biggest advantage that we hear, that's both a tactic and a benefit, is that organizations begin to ask, from the hippos all the way down, what insight drove this priority? And if you can get to that stage in the program, you have a very healthy, you're building the experience right. And so hearkening back to that landscape, that insights landscape that Paula talked about, it's a push-pull relationship of really rich qualitative and really accurate quantitative, in that both teams are often siloed to do this, and to cross that divide requires both sides of the brain to understand each other's language. And so you need a bit of both. And then on top of that, you have that really heavy effort piece. And so we want to take that out of it. We want to let human augmented AI do its magic really well. So it's humans have superpowers and AI has superpowers. And we really at WEVO want to bring the best of both together. So how do we make it effortless, insightful, and reliable? And that's what we're focused on, and really crafting and shaping the next generation of research. And so I want to geek out about this for a second from a practitioner lens, because I fell in love with a platform because I used it. And I want to talk about how I used it and how I see a lot of our customers and teams use it today. And this is across industries, across experience types. So whether you're testing an owned experience, a concept pre-live, a cross-channel marketplace that maybe you don't own, you need insights across all of those digital channels and experiences, because to the user, it's one journey. So the way I think about it in the flow of what could be and where I can layer insights and ease this process, it really comes down to a few steps along the way. And these are fluid, so these can happen asynchronously on their own, or they could happen in sort of the process that I'm going to show you step by step. You have that flexibility, you have that fluidity to choose how to set it up. So I could WEVO just the existing experience. Maybe it's just a page, maybe it's a journey across multiple steps, but I want to understand what the biggest problems are, and I want that to fuel my roadmap. Anytime I'm kicking off a new optimization or research program, that's the first step, is what problems can I validate? And then how can those validated problems become the foundation for that roadmap for the year ahead? That's going to help me build the best variations. What else is going to help me build the best variations is understanding what my competitors are doing well or poorly. You know, if we're addicted to A/B testing like I am, you wish that you could A/B test experiences you don't own, and you actually can and should. So think about testing multiple competitors head to head. We have a lot of customers do this on a quarterly basis. So you can A/B test those competitive experiences to learn and incorporate into your experience what works well that they're doing and avoid what doesn't. A lot of times people think, where do I start? Do I have to have a fully fledged concept before I can go test it? No, you can test what already exists, whether it's yours or what others have created, and save yourself that time and energy. Don't reproduce what doesn't work well. Reproduce and create an experience based on what does win. Then when you run your A/B test itself, I'm a huge advocate of, you want to WEVO alongside that and understand the why. So A/B testing is going to give you that data, that statistical significance of what performs well and doesn't, so you know what to release. But how often do we not know what to pivot and do next because an A/B test is flat or because it loses? So understanding that why is going to mean that you produce a much more impactful second or third or fourth variation, and you keep pivoting and you keep building on what works well. So you can now design even better iterations for your next experience, kick that back into your roadmap, fuel your roadmap with really robust learnings. And now you're really just off to the races, and you're going to see that win rate really improve and go up. So it's about that idea of how do we de-risk, how do we deliver, and then ultimately, how do we democratize? So that qualitative piece is and always will be critically important, led by human experts, UX researchers, designers. This is that traditional generative or formative research. This is really understanding that context, as Paula said, staying friction, like seeing video of a user struggle sometimes, but understanding that why. Quantitative, always important to de-risk the experiences that you're building and ensure that they're going to perform as expected before you release them and just make the gamble. So this is about that pod framework of those, producing the A/B tests and analyzing them and gaining the insights there, and ultimately measuring the performance. And then now we have this middle section, this idea of human augmented AI that's there to aid us and make every part of this much easier and more accessible across teams, where it's expert advised and trusted. You have to have a framework that the experts trust, but then it has to be something that's accessible to all these teams, so they're not just creating that backlog in the roadmap of requests. So across research, strategy, data, product, you name it, marketers, you have a standardized and repeatable setup, you have a proven and reliable methodology and framework, and you have scored industry benchmarks so you can really monitor and measure performance over time. So you're empowering your teams to shift left and lead much earlier in the process with the why to produce better and winning experiences down the road, ultimately making all of those new experiences you're releasing much more effective. So we just talked about a whole lot of information, and we want to bring it together. So I'm going to toss it over to Paula to do that.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, so what might it mean if we begin to incorporate qual and quant into the work that we're doing every day? So remember our left brain and right brain. You've got the quant side of the brain on the left, and that more qualitative UX research side on the right. So if we start to think about these differently, I want to challenge us to think about this more as an order of operations. So working left to right. So I want to consider a notion I'm calling shifting left. So let's consider putting the quantitative side, A/B testing, at the right, at the end of our process. So let's spend the time to learn about our customers first. Let's lead with qualitative data. So put the right brain work actually on the left side of the process. And when you begin when you begin a project or an analysis with qualitative work, you're really talking to customers and collecting feedback. Think about what you can gain, right? You get the prioritization of your roadmap, based on your customer priorities, not necessarily the business. You can de-risk by learning about perceptions and expectations of designs and UX before you begin to experiment. And you can really just ask the data to tell you, where should you be spending your time? Qualitative feedback can really bring that into focus for you. Understanding why things might win in your A/B testing program will help you develop the strongest test hypotheses as well. And ultimately, you can learn what to focus on next. So where is the customer telling you to go? So this can seem daunting, especially if you're in a culture of direction from a hippo, or maybe mistrust of a low sample qualitative feedback kind of program. But I can tell you that shifting left really will pay off. So a little bit of a peek behind the curtain at some Hilton data. So remember early on, we talked about the fact that across the sort of A/B testing industry, if you will, there's an average win rate of about 25% for finding actual winners based on hypotheses. So at Hilton, before we started down the path of really incorporating user research, and even today, when we run experiments that aren't led by this kind of roadmap, our test win rate is about 22%. When we overlay UX research and we think about all of the tests that that are based on our customer feedback and our learnings, our win rate jumps up to 38%. So when you think about that from a revenue perspective, from a conversion perspective, that's an enormous increase in winners of tests. So by just taking the time and kind of setting your priorities to listen to customers before you actually create hypotheses and launch experiments. So in summary, this idea of shifting left by building up UX research and for us, the practice of de-risking and informing the testing roadmap has led to fantastic gains. So hopefully you're able to take what you've seen here today and start to consider the idea of shifting left in order to be customer driven, and it helps you ruthlessly prioritize your roadmaps to focus on what matters to the customer. So it worked for us at Hilton. Hopefully it can work for you too.
Love it. So Jenni, we'll toss it back over to you. I'm not sure if we've had any questions come in or if there is any discussion among the group. Otherwise, we're happy to talk about anything that you want to or wrap up. And I think you're talking on mute, Jenni. There we go.
So
Never fails.
I haven't seen any questions come in yet, so I will give it a minute. I was wondering, I have a question for you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your expertise. And I so completely resonate with those points just about emphasizing the de-risking and bringing things earlier on. I'm sort of curious, as you were scaling and maybe like leveraging and implementing tools and services like WEVO, what are maybe some of the struggles that you faced or some lessons learned that you could share with us as we look to augment research?
Yeah, I can certainly talk about that of programs I've seen across brands, but maybe Paula, if you have a direct perspective of just challenges you've seen and overcome over the years as you scale the program.
So the easiest one to and probably the most relatable is this idea of small scale, low end qualitative research, and allowing that to drive direction. We're a very large enterprise. And so the idea of hearing from 10, 12 customers, again, just to give direction, we don't let 10 or 12 customers make decisions for us, but we do try and collect pros and cons and watch for friction points. And when you reach saturation after talking to 6 or 8 customers, that everybody is really talking about the same or experiencing the same struggles or have the same perspective, it can give a product team direction. And so one of the product teams understand that, but often sort of managing up on that kind of thing is a little bit difficult. So, what we found is just doing some of this work a little bit off the grid, and just running through a few cycles and watching the outputs and the outcomes, and what much richer, more valuable feedback that we were getting, and therefore better outcomes at the end. And then we were able to go back and then explain it to our leadership with some data to be able to say, going through this approach a few times resulted in this outcome. So I would say if there's a way to be able to to kind of do some of this work guerrilla style, then that's an easy way to overcome some of the feedback. There's also a lot of data from like Nielsen Norman Group, for example, has a lot of articles about small sample qualitative and how it is reliable, and how you can begin to think about programs like that. So that might help a little bit with managing executives. So Jenni.
Yeah, I think to just add to that, it's a similar vein, but I think the biggest mistake I've seen both brain programs try to do, but certainly when they try to combine them, is they just feel like they have to boil the ocean and everything has to be incredibly integrated and incredibly complex, and all these processes and systems have to be in place before you can launch the first test. And it doesn't need to be that complicated. It usually organically kind of, you want to be organized about it, but it organically finds its own rhythm if you just start small and begin to strive to be insight-led and data-driven. That's the most important message that you can promote within your organization. And then whether you're a maverick that's just trying to start a program from scratch and create that and become the hero or the heroine of that over time, which I fully advocate, or you're on a really big cross-functional team and you're one of many, I think just creating that atmosphere is really important. Of not every test is going to be the biggest test, not every study is going to be the biggest study. We just want to learn something. We just want to have a clear learning. And even in flat tests or small samples, that can give us direction for here's where we want to go now, understand a bigger sample size, or here's where we want to go understand the next iteration of what we can test after this. And that's why we're really passionate about making that more accessible as a solution, that you don't have to be an expert of many things. You can be a pro at your lane and then have access to solutions that make that easier. Great question. I don't see any more in the chat, so I'm guessing that we are in a good spot to go ahead and wrap things up. But Jenni, you tell us.
I think so. I think everyone's probably eager to get to lunch, depending on the time zone. So once again, thank you so much for coming and sharing on this topic, and spending some time answering my question. And for everyone else, this recording will be posted on the UXPA website, and keep an eye out for webinars coming in August and September. Thank you so much, Paula and Jenni.
Thank you. We enjoyed it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Go ahead and stop the recording.